Alright, as I previously said, my name is Draco Carollis, and I'll be taking the Production Research 101 classes today. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, good evening, whatever the case may be in your part of the world. Alright, this class is going to take you through the basics of T1 production and research within the world of Eve. Now, before we get started, just have a few ground rules for those of you who are participating. First is, for those of you on TeamSpeak, please leave the channel clear for myself only, i.e. no keying up, no speaking on TeamSpeak. Basically, it just helps things go faster. If I want to go ahead and let you guys say anything on TeamSpeak, I'll let you know during the class. Second thing,
new player.
Could you also please leave the class.E-UNI channel clear of chatter? There will be several sessions where you can go ahead and actually ask questions through the chat channel, but I'll also be linking things into the channel, so if you go ahead and clutter it up with just general chatter, some of your fellow classmates may miss it. So those are the two basic rules. I'll be breaking this up in classes up into various sections, so you can ask questions now and then. But we have got a bit of material to move through, so let's get started, shall we? Alright, my name is Draco Carollis. I'm a member of the Dead Canary Mining Corporation, which is a member of the Talos Coalition, who lives in Fountain Region, for those of you who are interested. And like most of the other members of my corporation, I'm a Care Bear. I'm primarily a professional miner. I also go ahead and do a lot of T1 production. I'm currently training up the skills to get into T2. And I've been running this class for the past, it's been about 8 or 9 months now. So I know a bit about production. I know quite a bit about research, but I'm not the be-all end-all. I've only been playing this game for about 18 months. If you have any more advanced questions after this class, I strongly recommend you ask the logistics section of the uni, or asking industry.e-uni, because those guys have been on here for years and they can go ahead and give you much better answers than I probably ever could. Anyhow, let's get started. One of the interesting things about EVE Online is that just about every item in the market, every ship, every piece of ammunition, pretty much every gun and missile that you can go ahead and play around with, and nowadays things such as pos towers and that sort of thing, they're all player produced, and which means that the EVE Online market is truly dynamic, and it's truly producer and consumer driven, and that's one of the things that makes EVE unique. I have yet to find another game that goes ahead and actually has that as one of its core mechanics. What it does mean for those, however, is that anyone who wants to get into production, they can do it fairly easily, and there's a fairly big market out there for your products. There's a little bit of competition, but if you go ahead and are tenacious enough, you will eventually sell what you want to produce. And if you don't want to sell it, production still there is a good idea, because you can produce just about anything. So if you want to go ahead and produce your own ammunition whilst you're running missions, or if you want to go ahead and produce your own ships and that sort of thing, production is there for anyone. So, how do we get into it? Well, to get into the basic T1 production, that is production of T1 ships, T1 ammunition, T1 modules, it's very simple. There's only one skill required, there's only a few items required. So, let's start off by going through the skills that you need. The basic skill that you need to get into T1 production is industry. This is the base skill that you need to do any production job. You train that to 1 and you can build just about any T1 item out there. In this particular case, industry, on top of that, industry also gives you a 4% reduction in the amount of time it takes to produce an item. So if you train that up to 5, you're actually producing things 20% faster than if you don't. That's the basic skill, and you only train that to 1. If you train it to 5, however, that's one of the prerequisite skills to go ahead and produce T2 items. I won't be covering T2 in this particular class, but I'm hoping to go ahead and put another one together soon that will be able to do it. Okay, Now, it's just one thing to go ahead and get industry one, so you can produce your own ammunition for missions and that sort of thing. But if you want to get into production a bit more seriously and start selling your stuff, pardon me, you're going to require a few other skills to go ahead and make yourself a bit more competitive. And the first of these you're going to require, in reality, is production efficiency.
Member left.
I'm sorry, the secondary skill that you're going to need if you want to get into production on a more serious basis is production efficiency, which is the one I just linked in the chat channel there. Now, production efficiency isn't required for industry, but it has a similar effect to the industry skill, whereby it actually reduces the amount of materials you need to go ahead and produce an item. And this is probably one of the more important skills you're going to need if you want to go ahead and be competitive in production. Because whilst 20% may not sound like much when you're producing a shuttle, which only requires about 1500 titanium, when you're talking about a battleship, which can require several million units of minerals, a 20% saving is a huge amount, and that's additional profit that you can make on top of it. Proto Burger, could you please stop keying up? Thank you. Okay. A third useful skill that you can go ahead and get whilst you're doing production is the mass production skill.
Player left.
What mass production does is it allows you to go ahead and run an additional job per level that you train up. So instead of running, I think it's about one job, basically you can go ahead and run 2 jobs if you train that to 1. And once you train the skill to level 5, you can then go ahead and start training the advanced mass production skill, which again gives you an additional slot per skill level. So it means that once you go ahead and get mass production and advanced mass production up to 5 each, you can run 11 jobs simultaneously. The final skill that is useful, it's not required but damn useful whilst you're producing, is the supply chain management skill. Now this skill is a little more interesting one, as it allows you to run jobs remotely. Without the skill, you have to actually be in the station where your raw materials are to actually set the job up. But once you go ahead and train this one, you can actually be a certain distance away from that station and access the job remotely via your Assets tab. Basically, if you have it at level 1, you can go ahead and access it whilst you're missioning in the same system or something like that. Level 2 means you can go ahead and exchange that range to 5 jumps, and when you get to level 5, you can go ahead and access any of your jobs within the region you're in. So basically, you could go ahead and have someone, if you wanted to, you could have someone couriering your stuff for you back and forth between Aldrat and Rennes, and you could sit in Rennes and produce stuff here in Aldrat. That's an example of what you can do for it. Okay, those are the basics. Those are some of the skills that you will require and what I'd like to get if you're going to be producing. So how about do you actually go about producing something? What else do you need in terms of, well, physical virtual items? Okay, there are 2 things that you need really. First off, you need a blueprint, and the second thing, you need a set of raw materials to work with. Okay, so what is a blueprint? Well, That is a blueprint. Specifically, it's a blueprint original. This is the blueprint is basically a set of instructions that the game uses to go ahead and turn a bunch of titanium, pyrite, and other assorted materials into a module or a ship or something like that. It's one of the things that you require. So let's go through it quickly. If you go ahead and flip over to the Attributes tab, the top two rows there will show that A, this blueprint is a blueprint original, and that in a single run of this blueprint, it will produce a single 350mm railgun 1. And you can see that little one there, it actually means it produces one item per run. Now this is important because some items most items only produce one item per run, but others actually can produce additional ones. Ammunition, for example, produces 100 rounds per run, and capacitor charges for capacitor boosters actually produce 10 items per run. The blueprint original item shows blueprint original. This, however, is an example of a blueprint copy. If you click on that quickly and flip over the Attributes tab, you can see it says blueprint copy. There's a bit of a difference between the two types, and we'll get onto that later on down the track. If you just quickly flip back to the 350mm railgun blueprint. Okay. One other thing to remember, with your T1 blueprints, it only produces meta 0 items, so as in Hammerhead 1, 350mm railgun 1, damage control 1. The named items and meta items, they are only available really through loot drops. So that's just something to quickly remember. Okay, moving down to the General Information tab, you've got a series of numbers there. Okay, first off, it has their productivity level and material level. This is an indication of how much research has been done on the blueprint itself. Productivity level is productivity research, which affects the manufacturing time for the item, and material level is the amount of material research you've completed, which affects the amount of materials required for it. Both of these affect what is known as the waste, and we'll get into that a little further down the track when we get into research. But basically, the high material level and high productivity level equal good. Okay, it also has the number of runs that the blueprint is capable of doing. Max runs per blueprint copy is when you're copying a blueprint, this is the maximum number of runs you can put on a copy. So in this particular case, you couldn't create a blueprint copy that has 500 runs. You could only produce a blueprint copy with 300 runs on it. It's a bit of a limiting factor. The other thing is the licensed production runs remaining. Now, in the case of a blueprint original, this number is always infinite. You can use it again and again and again until the ship that is carrying the blueprint blows up or you discard it. It will never run out. But if you flip back to that Hammerhead 1 blueprint, just quickly, you'll notice there that it says licensed production runs remaining 150. When you create a blueprint copy, you go ahead and set the number of runs that the blueprint can run for before it disappears. So basically, what this means is after that, this blueprint copy has produced 150 Hammerhead 1s, it would simply disappear. And that's the big difference between a blueprint original and a blueprint copy. Okay, if we could flip back to the 350mm railgun blueprint. Okay, manufacturing. This is basically the manufacturing time that is required to produce the item. In this particular case, it's got two items. It should have two lines. The first being manufacturing time and the second being manufacturing time U. The first is the base amount of time that is required to produce the item modified by its production level. The second is the same number but modified by industry skill modifier. So in my particular case, it actually says manufacturing time U 8 minutes, which basically means I've got my industry skill level 5 because that's 20% less than the actual manufacturing, than the base manufacturing time. It should be different for each of you depending on what level your industry skill is at. Okay, down the bottom, the researching section, research is going to be later on in the class, but we're just going to run through this quickly. Research time, each of them has actually got each of the 3 lines has actually got 2 different items. You've got research material time, you have research copy time, and you have research productivity time. Now the one you really should be looking at is the U line of each. Research material time is the amount of time it takes to do a single level of material research. Same with productivity time U. It's the amount of time it takes to do a single level of productivity research. The research copy time, however, is the amount of time it takes for you to produce a copy of this blueprint with a single run in it. So if I was to produce in my particular case, if I was to produce a single run copy of this blueprint, it would take me 1 minute. If I wanted to produce a single copy with 2 runs in it, or 2 copies with a single run in each, it would take me 2 minutes, and so on and so forth. Okay, that should be the attributes tab dealt with. Let's just move over now to the bill of materials, and if you could flip over to manufacturing, the tab there. The invention tab is used when we're doing invention, and we won't be covering that in this particular class. Okay, manufacturing. This has got 2 separate sections here again. Up the top it says skills, and as you can see, this item only requires the industry level 1 skill to be produced. Now it's pretty much the same for nearly every Tech 1 item out there. The second one is the one you should be more interested in. It's the materials tab, and this actually tells you what materials are required to produce the item. Now, unless your industry skill is at 5, your production efficiency skill is at 5, there should be 2 separate columns in there. There should be first off a set of numbers, and then a second set of numbers with the word U next to it. And what this does is it shows the difference between how much material is required base and how much is required depending on your production efficiency skill. If your production efficiency skill is at 5, like mine is, you only have 1 set of numbers. But for those who don't, you can see the difference between the 2 sets there. Again, just remember, each level of production efficiency reduces the amount of materials required by 4%.
Member left.
Okay, so that's a basic overview of what a blueprint is. So the next question is, where do you get these things? Well, blueprint originals like this are pretty much available all over Eve, all over New Eden. They're available in 2 separate areas. They're first off, in their unresearched form, their base form. They're viable from quite a number of different NPC cells across the universe. Now, which NPC cells have which blueprints depends really on the item you're trying to find. In this particular case, 350mm railgun 1. Railguns and missiles and shield mods are generally available from Caldari vendors. If you're looking for blasters and drone mods, probably best looking for Galente. Speed mods and autocannons, Minmatar, and when it comes down to armor and lasers, you're looking at Amar. However, just because you're looking for a particular type of blueprint or a particular type of event doesn't necessarily mean you have to fly into their space. Because the thing about Eve is that you got stations from from each of the races all over the place, depending on which region you're in any sort of region. So I can guarantee you that if you are looking for an armor mod blueprint or something like that, you won't have to fly to a Mars space. You can go ahead and find one probably within Metropolis fairly easily. However, if there isn't one, there's always the second place you can find them is on the basic market, because as well as getting As well as buying blueprints from NPCs, you can buy unresearched blueprints on the market from players. And there are some players out there who actually make their living shuttling back and forth between NPC sellers and trade hubs and selling blueprints on the open market there. So if you don't want to go ahead and go for a specific one, you could probably fly to Heck or Ren's and you could pick up pretty much any blueprint you wanted from out there.
Member left.
And in some respects, getting from the open market from players is probably the only way you're going to get some blueprints anyway. The only place that I know of that you can actually buy the mining barge blueprints, for example, from an NPC seller is from All Sovereignty Space out in Oo. So unless you're willing to go ahead and actually fly out into All Space, it's in the Outer Ring region, and actually go there, you're probably going to have to buy your Coveter blue BPO from a player in a market somewhere. So that's just something to remember. Okay, so that's a blueprint. What's the other item that you need to go ahead and produce something in T1 is materials. And by and large, when I say materials, I mean titanium, pyrite, noxicum, that sort of stuff. All of these are available from various places. First off, you can buy them from the market.
Member left.
I don't think I've seen a system that has a station in it that doesn't have a mineral market of some kind. So standard buying stuff applies in that case. The second place you can get it is through mining, which is something I particularly enjoy. Professional miner. So you go out there, you shoot lasers at rocks, you bring them back, you crush them up, you get the minerals you want. The third place you can get it is from loot refining. Now, this is something that CCP's actually nerfed recently. They wanted to go ahead and stop the flood of minerals from macro missioners and that sort of thing flooding onto the market, but to be honest, I haven't seen any changes in the loot tables yet. So if you end up finding a module that you can't sell or don't want to sell or don't think is going to sell well, you can refine it. And that's actually how I go ahead and make my own ammunition whilst on missions. And stuff I don't think will sell well, I go ahead and reprocess. I then go out and buy a blueprint.
Member joined.
And produce my own ammunition at my mission stations, which is a good way to save cash, really. The only exception to this using of mineral stuff to produce something is in rigs. Rigs don't require minerals, they require salvage materials. So when you go out after a mission and you salvage those pirate wrecks, instead of selling it, you can actually keep that stuff and use it to build rigs, which then sell on the market. And depending on what rats you've got, they drop different salvage. So that will show which type of rigs you can build and that sort of stuff. I'll just give you a quick example actually. Okay, this is the blueprint for a large cargo hold optimization 1 rig. Oops, wrong one. My apologies, let's try that again. Flip over to build materials and manufacturing, and you can see there it requires salvage materials instead of minerals to go ahead and produce. It also requires the actual rigging skills themselves to produce, so that's again another exception to T1 to the standard T1 only requires Industry 1 rule. So that's basically what you require to produce something. Are there any questions at this point about blueprints or raw materials? If you can type your question in the class. Okay, so Dao asks, are the materials required really whole numbers, or are there hidden decimal places? Like if it says U 136 for titanium, NIQ of 1,000 runs, will it require 136,000 titanium, or maybe more or less? No, it does not include decimal places. The system actually automatically rounds up and down on the blueprint itself. So what you said there, if it says 136 and you cook 1000, it will require 136,000 titanium. MemoCan asks, is it smart to mine your own materials? Ah, the eternal question, is it smart to mine your own materials? Yes and no. If you think you can go ahead and get the materials you can make, if you think you can get the materials you require in the same amount of time efficiently, well, yes, it is a good idea to mine it. The common way of looking at it is, in the amount of time that you've gone ahead and spent mining, if you were to mission instead, could you use the proceeds to buy the same minerals? It's a bit of a complex question, I know, but basically, if you're mining Veldspar and Scordite, maybe. So you've really got to go ahead and have a look at that time cost variance and that sort of thing. Alexander Ramazul asks, how can I tell if a blueprint on the market is original? Ah, yes, okay, my mistake, I missed that part out completely. All the blueprints on the market, the open market, when you hit the market tab, will be unresearched originals. You can't, once you go ahead and actually do a bit of research on a blueprint, you can't actually sell it on the open market anymore. The only place you can find that stuff is on the contracts page. The other thing is that the only place you can sell blueprint copies that you make is also on the contract pages. So if you're looking on the general market itself, it will always be blueprint originals. But if you're on the contract pages, you're probably better off having a look at yourself and seeing whether or not it's a blueprint original or a blueprint copy. So that's something to remember. Thank you for reminding me about that. I did not go ahead and put that bit in. Okay, Talnar asks, explain the sentence on the manufacturing tab. Bill of material does not take into consideration efficiency. We'll get into that in actually just a moment. Chadrick Belfonte asks, can you sell copies on the market? No, you can't sell copies on the Australian market. You can only sell it through contracts. Zero Lantern asks, what is the difference between research and non-research blueprints? We'll get into that when we get into research. Any other questions? Zetsubo Gatsui asks, is T1 production really worth it nowadays? Good question, actually.
Member joined.
Most of the production I do is production for myself. I do a little bit of selling on the side, but you really have to go ahead and have a look at it yourself and see whether or not it's worth it. Blake Muff asks, what can I bring in to butter up an R&D agent? R&D agents are more missions than research and production, and also a bit into T2 there. Alexander asks, how do you research on a blueprint? That's, again, coming up in the research section of this class. Are there any other questions about blueprints and materials at this point, or shall we move on? Okay, let's move on. Okay, so you've got your blueprint, you've got your raw materials. What do you do next? Okay, to go ahead and produce an item, you have to go ahead and you have to first off be in a station that actually has a science and industry section. I mean, not all stations have got manufacturing plants in them. Paytor Tech School, in fact, pretty much any school station in EVE does. Your stations that are marked as factories generally have manufacturing plants and that sort of thing. So first off, you've got to get your materials into the correct station. Second thing you got to do, you then right click on the blueprint itself and you select manufacturing. Apologies, that is the wrong screenshot. It's interesting. Okay, let's start again. First thing you do is you right click on a blueprint and you click manufacturing. And what you'll then end up getting is an interface that will look something like this. This is the basic manufacturing interface. It goes ahead and will make you sort through all the basic stuff you got to do to set up a manufacturing job. So first thing you got to do is you got to pick an installation for it. Now, when I say installation, those stations that have manufacturing slots in them will generally have a number of slots available. I think in the case of PTS, it's actually got about 50 lines that can be run simultaneously on the station. Thank you. And you go ahead and actually select this. If you're in your correct station, you click Pick Installation, and you'll end up getting a interface like this one. This one that should be in that screenshot there. Now this goes ahead and tells you quite a bit about the manufacturing slot that you're going to select. First off, it'll tell you the next free time. Basically, this is what the delay will be before your job will actually start running. This, generally speaking, you shouldn't have too much of a problem finding a manufacturing slot in any of the public stations. You may have a little bit of problem in some of them, a couple of hours delay or something like that, but it's not going to be too long. Next item over says install cost. This is a one-up cost you got to pay up front when you install the item. It's set, this particular case is 1,000 ISK. After that is the cost per hour. For each, as I showed in the blueprints, producing a single item takes an amount of time, and this is the going rate you got to pay for it. After that, you've got the time and material multiplier. In public cases, this is always 1.0. It's always going to be the same. But the exception to this rule is if you go ahead and use a POS to go ahead and produce an item. When you're out in deep space without a station, you sometimes don't have access to a station manufacturing facility. So you can use a manufacturing array at a POS station to go ahead and do it instead.
Member left.
This is an example of one. It's an ammunition assembly array. The main advantage that you've got for using manufacturing arrays over station manufacturing slots is that they generally have a time bonus on your manufacturing time. So in this particular case, with the ammunition assembly plant, it's actually a 0.75 job time bonus. There is a POS module out there called a rapid assembly array, which actually drops that time multiplier down to 0.5, but in return it has a material multiplier of 1.25. It's just something to remember. Okay, so once you've gone ahead and selected your manufacturing slot, you then also select the number of runs you want to go ahead and produce this time round, and you should end up with, and then hit the OK button, and this interface here will pop up. This is the final step before going ahead and completing a job. It's a summary of what it's going to need. This will tell you how many materials are required and whether or not you're actually missing anything. In this particular case, I'm actually missing a few pieces of zydrine and some titanium. It will tell you what skills are required. As you can see, I've got the Industry 1 skill. It also gives you a good amount of information about everything else. For example, it tells you how long the production run's going to last. It will tell you what the cost is going to be to install the item. It will tell you, and it also gives you a summary of the multipliers with this item in particular. Once that's done, you're satisfied with everything, you've got all the materials required, you hit accept quote, the windows will disappear, and it will be on its way. Now, with manufacturing jobs, the manufacturing jobs continue even, they're done automatically. You don't have to monitor them, you don't have to do any sort of mini game or anything like that. It just runs in the background. You can then go off and do whatever you want. You can go ahead and go missioning if you want to. You can go PvPing, do whatever. The manufacturing runs will run in the background all the time. They will run even during downtime and even when you're offline. And the way you check to see where your job
Member joined.
is through the Science and Industry tab. You select jobs and you select get jobs, and it will go ahead and bring up all the jobs, Science and Industry jobs you've currently got going. In this particular case, it shows that I've got a Hammerhead 1 blueprint going. It shows where it is, it shows how far it is away from me. It also shows you how long there is to go on the job itself, and what the production is going to be. And that is basically what it takes up. Now, if you suddenly realise that after you go ahead and starting a job you've made a mistake, you can hit the cancel job button down the bottom there. And what that will do is it will return the blueprint to you. Any materials that you put into the job when you started it will be lost. So you only get the blueprint back. Now, once the time on the production run has gone down, and that TTC reads ready, and state reads ready, the cancel job button will turn into a deliver job button. Now, generally speaking, you cannot deliver a job remotely, not unless you've got supply chain management. You actually have to be in the station itself to deliver the job. And once you click deliver job, the job will disappear from Science and Industry, and the brand new item will appear in your Items tab, or Chips tab, depending on which one you've got. And that's it. You successfully produced the T1 item. That's it. Congratulations. Okay, and that is basically it. That is what it takes to produce a T1 item. Are there any questions up to this point? Okay, Patrick Delfonte asks, when an installation is set, does it take a BPO, or can you use the same BPO for multiple installations? No. It will go ahead and take the BPO and use it for that production run. So, no, you can't use it for multiple installations. The best way probably to do that is to go ahead and actually make copies of your blueprint original and run them alongside each other. Balaganoff asks, but in most cases you can buy it much cheaper on the market, so how to cut costs? Well, in a lot of cases, the stuff on the market is actually being driven by speculation and traders. But to cut costs, you actually do research, which is what we're going to get into next. Felix Moores asks, do you need anything special for ship production? No, T1 ship production is pretty much the same as T1 module production. You just require Industry 1. Jovian Castigar asks, something I forgot to ask you. Can you explain about using quartz blueprints? That will depend really on your individual corpse rules with regards to blueprints. You'll have to ask the logistics team about that. I think you can borrow them in E-UNI, but don't quote me on that.
Member joined.
Are there any other questions at this point? Okay, so we've now covered T1 production items. Now, as a lot of you have gone ahead and noticed by now, producing your own T1 items and then putting them onto the market is not very wise, because items on the market actually cost less than the materials it takes to cost them. That's because most of the items that are now on the market are researched in the first place. Research is a way of reducing the amount of time and materials it takes to produce an item. This is done through the research mechanic in the game itself. Okay, so how do you go about research? Well, like production, it requires a few skills. The main one is the science skill. This is one of the basic skills you require to actually do any sort of research. In this particular case, so as well as allowing you to get access to research and actually set up research jobs, it also gives you a 5% bonus to your copying speed. And copying is a specific sort of research that we'll get onto further down the track. Now, apart from science, there are a few other skills that, like industry, are nice to have but not required. The first of which is scientific networking. Okay, scientific networking is like supply chain management for science. It allows you to go ahead and set up jobs remotely. But the important thing to remember, but the reason this skill is particularly special is because it allows you to run remote access jobs through the pods. Now, the only way you can actually use the Uni's pods for research jobs is to actually use remote job allowance. I will not go through how it does there, because there is actually a section on the wiki, on the E-UNI wiki, about how to do it. I know I should have actually put that into my notes, that link into my notes. But if you have a look around on the wiki and find the link and find the page there, it should go through a full list, a full procedure on how to access the pods remotely and do your research jobs. So scientific networking is a very valuable skill to have. The third skill to go ahead and consider getting is laboratory operation. And this skill allows you, much like mass production, to run multiple jobs side by side. And also like mass production, it has a secondary skill called mass lab operation, which again gives you additional slots. So those are the basic skills that you require. There are a few other sundry ones. For example, metallurgy skill actually helps you in your research also. There are also various science skills which can give you a hand with some of your research. But let's get on to the types of research there are. There are 5 types of research: copying, production efficiency, material efficiency, invention, and reverse engineering. Reverse engineering is really mainly used for T3 production. It's what you use to go ahead and get a hold of your strategic cruiser blueprints. Invention is the first step of doing T2 production, so we're not going to cover that here either. Copying, as you may have already guessed, is used to produce a blueprint copy from a blueprint original. Production efficiency reduces the amount of waste on your production on the amount of time it takes to produce an item, and material efficiency reduces the amount of waste on how much materials it takes to produce. Blaganov, I understand you may have questions, but can you please wait until the Q&A session comes up, because we will be covering this. Thank you. Now I've lost my place. Okay. Whenever you get a initial blueprint, if I just quickly go ahead and link this one again for you. Just go ahead and quickly flip onto that attributes. It will say Wastage Factor. Each blueprint has an inherent waste in it. That is, materials that you have to put into the job to go ahead and reduce it. But when you then go back and reprocess the job, those materials you won't get back. For most items, it's 10% base. So the amount that you're actually seeing in the bill of materials item is actually 110% of the base raw materials required. So how do you reduce this? By going ahead and doing research. Material level research reduces the material waste, and productivity level research actually reduces the time wasted. And the way it works is that the actual amount of waste is equal to the base waste times 1 divided by the research level plus 1, or that's the formula you use to go ahead and work out what the waste is going to be for your material levels, which is probably going to be a bit more important than your time production, or it is for me at least. So as you can see, it's actually a principle of diminishing returns. If you go ahead and do additional material level, if you research a blueprint to material level 1, it reduces the amount of waste to half. If you train it to 2, it goes ahead and reduces it down to a third, and so on and so forth. Now, even though it may not sound like much, like half or a third or something like that, consider this, that a Abaddon-class battleship requires approximately 10 million units of titanium. Now, you can probably guess that about 1 million of that is waste, so reducing that down to half, reducing that waste down to even 10%, that is a lot of titanium you don't have to get a hold of. So that's just something to remember. Now, the amount of it will eventually reach a point where the rounding factor where the rounding system in EVE Online will go ahead and simply reduce the waste to effectively 0. And there are a couple of websites around the place which go ahead and actually will calculate that for you. This is actually the one I use. It goes ahead and will calculate how much waste there is on each item at various production and material levels around the place. And it's what I use to go ahead and find a good level to get to. Because whilst you can go ahead and do 200 levels of material research for any blueprint, some of the research times for larger ships and that sort of thing actually are several days per level. I mean, I went ahead and set up a Drake blueprint for material level research about a month or so ago, and I was only able to get 7 levels out of 30 days research. When you're talking about when you're talking about something like a freighter, for example, it's actually got a research time of several weeks per level. I think it's pretty much the same for larger capital ships too. So it may not be as efficient to go ahead and research them to high levels. Now, when you're researching something, when you decide to research something, you have to remember you can only research a blueprint original. You cannot research a blueprint copy. When you create a blueprint copy, it will go ahead and retain the material and time efficiency levels of its original, and it will lock it. You can't research a blueprint copy any further past that. So, how do we set up a blueprint research job? Well, setting up a research job is actually not that much different from setting up a manufacturing job. It uses pretty much the same interface. Oh, that sucks. The picture isn't working. Okay. Okay, there we go. What you do is you right-click the blueprint original you want to research, and you select either material or productivity research. In this particular case, I've gone ahead and selected material research to have a look, to just show you guys what's going to happen with it. And as you can see, the interface is actually not that much different from the industry interface. You have to pick an installation for starters, and in this particular case, I'm having a look at the public slots. And as you can see, this is actually the main problem we've got with research around the place. If you're looking for a public slot, expect to go ahead and have at least a 10 to 15 day wait, and that's at least. I'm currently running a couple of jobs that had 25-day waits just to get the public slot because my corp doesn't run a POS in HiSec anymore. That is the problem with public slots. They are taken up pretty much anywhere, whether it be in HiSec or low-sec. This really leaves using a POS slot as the most effective way to go ahead and do research these days. And it's done through the mobile laboratory setups. These are POS modules. You can go ahead and link up there. The E-UNI has got quite a few of them set up in their POS here in Aldrat. And again, have a look around the wiki, ask a few questions and chat and that sort of thing, and you'll be able to find out how to access them. I do not have the link myself. I will have to include that in my next set of notes. Anyway, once you've gone ahead and selected a slot, you then go ahead and select the number of levels you wish to research. Now, the thing to remember about research is that you actually have a time limit of 30 days. You cannot set up a job that will last for longer than 30 days. And depending on the type of item that you've got going, it may go ahead and take a while to do things. Sorry. Once you've gone ahead and actually selected the number of levels you want to research, then go ahead and hit OK, and you'll end up with an interface like this one. As you can see, it will go ahead and say, well, no materials are really required, very few skills are required. It will simply tell you how long it will take and how long it will cost to do the research. Once again, you go ahead and, once you're satisfied, you hit accept quote, and the job will run in the background. Delivery of a job is very much the same as an industry job. You go ahead and monitor it through your Science and Industry tab, and once it's done, you hit Deliver Job, and it will return your blueprint with the brand new levels of material research, or productivity research, or whatever it is. Copying is actually not that much different either, but it doesn't really require that much in the way of skills, and copying slots, unlike research slots, are a bit more accessible. With the interface, I do apologise, I haven't got any actual items, any actual screenshots for it, but in the initial interface, you'll actually select the number of blueprints you want to produce, blueprint copies you want to produce, and the number of runs you want to produce on each of them. And once again, that will go away. You'll complete the job, and it will return a number of brand new blueprint copies for you.
Member joined.
Okay, are there any questions up to this point? I know there are a few.
New player.
No questions about research at this point? Okay. Whilst researching a blueprint, can you still use it to build stuff? No, you can't. The blueprint is much like an industry job. It's taken away, it's being modified, you can't use it whilst it's being researched. Lemmy Winks asks, sorry, that was the one I just did. Chalby's Mortis asks, what do damage per job and waste columns on the research mean? Sorry, I'm not too certain where those are. Nope, sorry, I don't see it. Anyway, Zibatu asks, what kind of stuff is worth to be researched? I've asked a few times around and we got mixed answers. Well, that's because you're going to get mixed answers about whatever you do. I mean, I'm currently researching a bunch of ships I want to produce so I can reduce the amount of materials it takes to build them. But it's a trade-off, really. The cheaper items are easier to research because the research duration time is less for them. But the amount of reduction you get through each level of research is significantly less. But if you're researching a battleship, each level can take a couple of days, and the amount you lose that is being reduced is a lot higher. So everyone's got their own opinions in that respect. You've got to sort of make up your own mind. Alexander asks, say I buy a 66 million blueprint for a Galante vessel, start researching, saving materials, etc. How hard will it be to recoup that initial investment? This is why they call EVE Online spreadsheets online. You've really got to go ahead and do a few calculations yourself. I honestly couldn't tell you just off the top of my head how long it's going to take. You've got to go ahead and sort of see how much you could go ahead and get for a vessel, how much it's going to cost you, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I know it's not exactly helpful, but you've got to make your own decision about that and do a bit of analysis for it. Yeah, damage per job and waste. Yes, I see them now. Shandir asked what were the two damage per job and waste columns. Well, waste. This interface here is actually taken probably from one of the other
Member joined.
Interfaces and just modified for what is required. Damage per job is actually used for T2 production. It's when you're using a RAM, you can only use them for a certain number of jobs before they get destroyed. Waste is, again, that's probably waste from materials. So this is probably a modified T2 production interface.
Member joined.
Okay, are there any other questions at this point? Melcian asks, we get access to POS research at freshman and above? Yes, I believe that is the correct rules.
Member
I believe
joined.
that is. No, actually, I think you get, is it freshman or student title? I'm not too certain. You have to ask someone for that. As a note on the Vexor question, would it be possible to check how VPO contracts are selling too? Yes, we can go ahead and have a look at the contracts. I know I picked up, actually I went ahead and picked up a set of Light Scout drone research blueprints for about 30 million a few weeks back, and they were partly researched along the way, so I thought, yay!
Member
Let's get
joined.
those. Much better. So, any other questions at this point? Okay. Okay, Mac Mechanics asks, if you research something to the 30-day limit and you get me 50, can you do it again for another 30 and get to 100? Okay, that was something I did miss out. When you do research on a particular item, the number of levels that you research during that run is actually added to the current research level of the blueprint. So yes, exactly what you said. You can go ahead, if you're able to go ahead and research something for 30 days and get a level of 50, if you then go ahead and research for another 30 days, you can add an additional 50 on top of that. So yes, you don't have to start over every time. It's cumulative like that. Shandy asks, I thought the higher levels were slower. No, they're not slower. It's just that the return you get on the research at the higher levels is lower. Mac Mechanics asks, what level of ME do I research to as standard? Really depends on the blueprint itself. If it's something like ammunition, I'd go ahead and research it all the way until the waste was 0. But if you're talking about a ship, I generally find that my general assumption is something, for me personally, I go 20 or 25, level 20 or 25, because that reduces it down to 4 or 5%, which is enough for me, really. Shandir asks, what makes research slower then? More expensive BPOs? I don't know if more expensive BPOs is the correct term. Larger items. It will take longer to research a battleship than a frigate, for example. That's basically the only guide I can give you, really. Look, it takes 5 seconds to check how long it takes to research a BPO, so just have a look at it that way, I guess. Alright, now before we go into the final Q&A session, you've got your good old little item. You've gone ahead and decided, yeah, let's sell this stuff. The question is where? So where do we go ahead and sell that stuff? Okay, that's a very good question, actually. There are several places you can go ahead and sell something. One interesting way you can go ahead and actually... One place that you can go ahead and sell stuff, if you're just getting in... A good suggestion I've got for you, if you're just getting into production, One place you can go ahead and sell stuff is in Loki systems. When I started out manufacturing, I was producing targeting computers. It's one of the items that the newbies require to complete their tutorials. And they were selling like hotcakes. I was selling everything that I was making with it, and I was actually setting the price. Basically, it was a couple of hours job for me. I bought a tracking computer blueprint. I went out and mined the titanium. I went out and bought the megasite to produce it. Went back, built it, and I was producing 100 a day, and I was selling them all within a matter of hours of putting them up. So that's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is you can go ahead and use production to sell to your alliance or your corporation. That's one of the things I'm trying to get set up for my corp, because they're all out in Double O and I'm in high sec. I'm trying to set up a way that I can go ahead and produce pos fuel and ammunition and that sort of thing for them. Well, even though they're probably actually doing it a heck of a lot more efficiently than I can. A third way you can sell them is you can sell them on the open market, and that is probably the way that most manufacturers sell their stuff. They haul it all to a trade hub and they sell it on the open market. Now that goes ahead and subjects it to trader influences and the like, but it works and it sells well. Another way you can do it is you can sell it at mission hubs. Mission runners run through ships and modules and ammunition like it's going out of style. So you go ahead and find a mission hub that you can go ahead and sell it, and you'll sell that sort of stuff quite well. Another interesting way you can actually go ahead and sell stuff is you can actually sell stuff at interfaces between high sec and null sec. And yes, they actually do exist. One example is the system of Kari. It's actually a Mars system out in Tashmerkan region. But the interesting thing about it is that one of the jumps is YMPWL, which is one of the entry systems into Providence. When I actually flew out with in CVA space for a couple of weeks, and this was one of the choke points that was constantly being camped by Ushkan. It's an interface into Providence that goes directly into nullsec, and the stations in Ether, which is actually one jump back from Kari, were heavily frequented by CVA and Ushkan pilots. When you're actually producing stuff out in Double O and actually looking at the Double O market, there is usually a 30 to 40% markup on standard Empire prices. That's due to the rarity and the amount it takes to go ahead and actually haul the stuff out there and produce it. So if pilots are able to go ahead and find a place like Ether and Kari to go ahead and buy their ships and modules from instead of using Double O, they're going to take it. So you can probably find a very good market in those sorts of systems. And the final way you can go ahead and sell things is you can go ahead and sell things on contracts. I'm not too certain whether it's the best way to do things, but it's certainly a way of doing things. You can sell packages, you can sell fitted chips and stuff like that. It's really completely up to you. So that's basically it. That is Research and Production 101. That is the end of my notes. Are there any general questions at this point about research, production, and selling? Shelby Mortis asks, so time efficiency only really affects costs because of the installation hire time? That's absolutely correct, Shelby, it does. Okay, Max Mechanic asks, do I run a lot of R&D agents? R&D agents aren't really about research and production in T1. They're more for T2, and currently I've only got the skills to run one. So there's your answer. Jovian Castigar asks, has PI had any impact on T1 production? From what I understand about planetary interaction, it doesn't have that much of a direct influence on T1 production per se. it will go ahead and it affects it because planetary interaction is how you now produce pos towers. But all the stuff that comes out of planetary interaction really only affects T2 manufacturing because it produces what used to be known as trade items, tracking systems, and consumer electronics. They're all items that go into T2 manufacturing.
New player.
No, repair paste. There's always something that goes ahead and has an exception to the rule.
Member joined.
Are there any other questions at this
Member
point?
joined.
Oh, alright then, that's basically it.
Member left.
We've actually finished about 10 minutes ahead of schedule for once, which is a new one for me. Anyway, just before you guys all sign off and that sort of thing and head out to blowing up rats again, there is, one of the things that was just when I first did this is, it's one thing to go ahead and sit around and listen to me yap on all the time, but it's another to actually get your hands dirty and try it out for yourself, because I can go ahead and explain this till the cows come home, but if you actually do it yourself, you actually learn a heck of a lot more. So, I've actually got a bunch here of Hammerhead 1 blueprints. If you want to go ahead and actually get a hold of one, so you can try it yourself, I'll give you the blueprint. You'll have to get a hold of the materials, but you can go ahead and try a bit of manufacturing for yourself. So if you want one of these blueprints, you can just go ahead and say so in chat now. I'm in Paytor Tech School in Aldrat, so yeah, they're blueprint copies. So if you're in Paytor Tech School, can you just say so, and I'll trade one to you as soon as I can. Yeah, unfortunately, I have to go ahead. You have to be in Paytor Tech School. I can't trade across subspace communications. Sorry.
New player. Member left. Member left. Member joined. Member left. Member left.
But apart from that, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording this, so thank you very much for your time.